Hi, my name is Sonia Marushka, and I'm a sophomore at Benton Academy. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to do this interview. Would you please provide your name and some of your background information about your education and career? Okay, my first question is, do you have a set of ethical principles that you use when faced with difficult questions or situations in your career?
So as a CEO, I'm a director of the company that I'm with. And so, of course, there are some very particular ethical standards that are required. And the parent company that owns us has a set of ethics requirements that help drive, overall behavior of the organization. But I think more importantly, it comes down to how, as an individual, you present yourself and the values that you bring to the world. I think that
Mm-hmm.
things that how you behave and what you do, and that's always been a really important part of who I am.
Definitely.
Is
Mm-hmm.
on my own personal values and bringing those to the table, and certainly one around honesty and transparency is really, I think, very important as who I am as an individual, and then how I bring myself to the workforce and organization.
My second question is, do you think that any particular business question, decision, or situation represents a difficult ethical issue?
Well, I think that um, when you're in business and been in business for the length of time that I've been in business, I think that you do get presented with difficult situations, right? That
Yes.
come to you from time to time, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can make sound judgments, and you make those sound judgments based on information, based on facts, and then you've also got to apply your own beliefs and values to those,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whether that be a situation where somebody's done something, it might be a situation where somebody needs help or support within the organization. It may be that you're in a business context where some kind of conflict has come your way, and you've got to think through what you do about that and how you behave, and how you conduct yourself. And in fact, I had a good example of that. A client of ours came, and they have a son who has the skill sets, the types of skill sets that we employ within our organization. So of course, the client came to me and asked, "Oh, would you take a look at my son's resume? He'd be really keen to become part of the community." So you end up in this quite difficult situation, right, where
Mm-hmm.
aren't you have a client who's paying you money as to the organization to provide services to them, and now this client, an individual, based on that business
Mm-hmm.
relationship, asking for a personal favor. So then you have to think about, how do you handle that situation? How do you enable somebody um, to feel comfortable that have they stepped over a line? Haven't they stepped over a line? How do you have the right conversation with the client, and then also how do you handle the individual who actually, as an individual, has a right to apply to a position at our company like anybody else and not be discriminated against in that process. So, how do we make sure that that individual is treated fairly, and also, but also not favourably over other candidates? And
Mm-hmm.
so it becomes a difficult situation that you have to manage, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's when I come down to the point where, but also your own personal values and standards, in order to make sure that navigated appropriately and fairly.
Mhm, mhm. My third question is, have you faced any obstacle in applying your ethical principles in business situations?
Yeah, I have. I have. I recall when we spoke initially, I talked about a situation where somebody was actually stealing from a company representations,
Mhm,
their personal expenses, for the money back from the company. So, that was a very, very difficult situation because to start with, we had suspicions, make false accusations, and then that puts their reputation has been questioned unfairly. And so, it requires very thoughtful ways of navigating those situations and making sure that all of the scenarios that you don't make any assumptions in that process and that ultimately you get to the right outcome for the situation and that everybody's treated appropriately in that situation. And that one in particular ended up stolen and or misrepresented so that they could get more money back.
mhm.
Got to decide how to handle it. And, yes, that I think that's a really good example. But I've had many thoughtful about it, and I think that those the skills that you develop in respect to your values and they become just as important as the actual skill sets that you need for a particular job, right? Whether that be a sales job, a marketing job, or any kind of career, you end up developing a set of skills that are relevant for that job and for that career. Also got to have these well-rounded business skills that enable you to be successful. I always try and encourage people to learn that acumen in addition to the actual specific competencies that they're wanting to develop. So that you're not in a situation where you don't know.
My last question is, do you have any advice that you could provide for me as I think about ethical issues that I may face as a young woman who will one day pursue a career?
That being a woman presents you and you and I have talked about that before. As a woman, it's really, really important to have a and what you want to be.
Mhm.
I tell my two daughters all of the time, off fairly and respectfully, and I think it's important to and really to be in an environment and that it welcomes diversity and differences of choice. I think that the more and more as a culture and as organizations we can foster that, the more successful. I think having a good, strong sense of who you are as a person, who you want to be, what's important to you, what do you value, that's just as important to as to what is it that you want to do.
Mhm.
Trying to develop both of those skills and learning how to speak on behalf of yourself. And not everybody is comfortable doing that. So, how do you develop the skills that enable you to handle conflict situations and handle situations where you need for yourself? I think that those are really develop and you will always develop, you'll always be developing those skills. That's a lifelong learning that you'll always want to keep developing. It's not something that you'll just have it and then think about it anymore, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much for your time. This has been so helpful, Miss Bolton.